Hello, bot fans, and welcome to another edition of Red Square, Blue Square, your go-to for BattleBots recap and reaction. I'm your host, Richard Tiemann, and this is episode 10 of our little show here, and we are going to do things just a little differently tonight. Normally, this is your go-to for recap and reaction, but this special episode might be more of a prediction and premonition episode. That's right. I've printed one out. I've joined the club. The tournament of 32 bracket is officially filled out for me here of the F.A.N show in Red Square, Blue Square. So this is my 32 prediction episode where I go over all my matchups and the reasons why I believe these bots will win over other bots and who is ultimately hoisting the giant nut above their head. But I'm not going to do it alone. So, John, you can take the night off. There's no actual spoilers in this episode, just a whole lot of great content and conversation. So here we go. Let's do this thing. In the red square is your host with the most, the man who loves football and nonsense, and yes, especially robotics. He is the host of Red Square, Blue Square, me. But if I'm in the red square, which is a great color square, by the way, if I'm in the red square, who is in the blue square? Well, you may know him because he's got 4 total BattleBots championships. He's actually taking the season off to just kick back, relax, and watch it all play out as a fan. But for the next few episodes, he's still the reigning champion, captain of one of the baddest bots to ever be in the battle box, Paul Ventimiglia of Byte Force. Welcome, Paul. How are you?
Thanks, Richard. It's good to see you again, even virtually after it's been a couple of years since I saw you in person, but it's always a pleasure to be on your show.
Yeah, man. Welcome. Love the shirt. Love the backdrop. I mean, this is good.
Gotta represent.
Look.
It's a comfortable shirt. It's good.
So you've been kind of in the fan chair this season, just sitting back, watching and enjoying. Like how you been? How has that experience been? And what's life had in store for Paul Ventimiglia?
Yeah, it's different taking a little break off. Very, I would say I've appreciated the break very much because it just was a lot of burnout in engineering and robotics and BattleBots because you work so many late hours and it's on top of your day job and all that kind of stuff. It takes a lot out of you in both just financially, mentally, physically, the back pain and all that kind of stuff. So sitting out one season when it's less than ideal for safety and sort of fundraising aspects and all that kind of everything related to COVID was sort of a no-brainer for our team in terms of the risk to reward ratio of it all impacting our lives and taking time off while we're dealing with 2020. So it was sort of easy in that sense. And then being able to watch again from the sidelines, of course, I get a little bit of the FOMO of just wanting to be out there. I mean, the competitive side of me sees a field of the most new robots that we've ever seen before at one time. And in many ways, a lot of robots that were sort of rushed or that may not have normally been let in if it was as tightly controlled application process. So it's just really fun to see them and imagine how would we have faced them. I wish I were in there, actually in the tournament and competing, but it's fun to watch from the fan seat.
Yeah, absolutely. I think any chance you get to kind of take a step back and enjoy things as a fan. I know when I started into media and covering games and events, like I didn't even realize that one of the last games I attended as a fan could very well be the last game I ever attend as like a full-on fan. And it was a very, eye-opening moment for me. So you got to take these where you can get them. And I know 2020 had a lot of bad news, but please tell me some good news.
We focus a little more internally. So Tina and I got married. So you see Tina on TV as a teammate, but now she's also my wife, and we moved into a new home. So working on the garage setup. This is the one corner of the garage that looks less messy. The rest of the garage is, as you'd expect, filled, floor to ceiling boxes of parts and normal household garage items. So it's certainly been a year to rebuild internally in terms of getting resituated and making things better and all that. And to that other comment is I plan to be back. There's no chance that I'm out forever. That's not in me because I can't turn off the wanting to design in my head and design new robots and compete and build new robots. That's very much a big core part of me and in my blood.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of folks that competed this season that were happy you took a year off, and they're
Oh
probably like,
yeah.
"Hey, don't rush back. Hey, go
Oh, a
ahead."
big part of me. I mean, I'd love to see new champion. I mean, that's a truth statement. The first thing I thought when I think in my head is decide is I could tell her, there will be a new champion. I'm the first person that can declaratively say that before anyone else. If we're not competing, no matter what, there will be a new one. And I'd love to see that. I think just I want to see what happens, and it's always cool to see. I mean, there's so much luck involved in BattleBots. So there's a big part of it. That's all the preparation, the design. But in terms of actually the tournament and the bracket, um, it can go any different direction, and so it's always exciting to see what happens.
Well, congratulations again. I'm glad that there was some good news for you out of 2020, and I'm glad you've been enjoying watching the season as a
Thank you.
fan. I have my bracket all filled out for the fans at home. I'll go ahead and throw up a graphic for you so you guys can follow along. But the question I asked Jake and Jen last week after it was announced was, let's not talk about snubs because there was only 3 fights for each team to try to qualify to get in.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly there was probably going to be some arguments for ones that only had 1 win that got in over others that had only 1 win. It's very difficult with only 3. But there were some seedings that I thought were rather questionable. In fact, right here, I show that at the end of the season, 3-0 bots, there were 6, and half of them were seated in the top 10, and the other half were below. And I just thought that was very odd. What else stood out to you when you saw the revealing of the 32?
I don't put too much stake into the details of the onesie twosie. Sure, top half of the bracket, top third, that matters. I take it more as this is reality as a competitor of what the production thinks about your chances. So, in terms of whether or not you think you should be there, you could win, about your special, that's a representation of how you've portrayed yourself both in the pits, to the production, to the other teams, because I think a lot of the seedings sort of generate from rumors in the pits and teams talking to each other and teams talking to production and teams talking to people like Peter Abramson as the bot whisperer saying, who do you want to face this year? Who do you not want to face? Who are you
Yeah.
worried about? And so there's so many factors involved. And of course, from the BattleBots perspective, the pre-fights matter, and they do matter a fair amount. I mean, they're probably the biggest factor that's going to determine seeding overall. But overall, there's a lot of human subjective element to how they're going to pick the seedings, the matchup. Overall, I just take it as okay, that is what it is, and don't put too much stake into. No reason to argue about 1 or 2 spots or anything like that. Personally, before we've only been number 1 ranked once, and I just saw it more as a well, when the robots that were ahead of us were robots that we've faced and beaten multiple times, and we still didn't get ranked above them. I saw it as okay. They must not have the best view of us always.
Well, I certainly have a great view of you, and I know better than to put you below anything than a 3rd seed. But we're not talking about you right now. We've got a whole new slate of 32, the biggest tournament that we've seen in BattleBots, and we'll just go chunk by chunk as they revealed them last week on TV. So in my bottom left corner, we have number 4 Uppercut versus Hijinks, and then Beta versus Ribot, Black Dragon versus Slammo, and Mad Catter versus Tombstone. Now, before I tell you my winners, the matchup that really stands out to me, and maybe you agree or disagree on this, Mad Catter versus Tombstone. One, because Mad Catter, a 3-0 bot, ranked number 12 going into this. But I feel like Martin Mason has really had something to prove this season. And then Ray Billings, though, there's nothing quite like postseason Ray Billings, save for a couple of flukes here and there. So he's going to go in after not having a great regular season, looking to also prove a point. So in my mind, this is the match to watch. What do you think about these first set of fights here?
Yeah, I agree with that in the sense that every single time you look at a Tombstone matchup, um, and this will apply to most matches. It's all about that 1 or 2 hits that will catch someone offside. And so that could be the difference of someone like Mad Catter. If they have a good strong wedge and they get one solid hit, they could be just like Witch Doctor or Bite Force when they've broken a blade off a tombstone. And then you can also imagine the fact of the drivetrain of Mad Catter's got those side plates and those sidewalls, and any one good hit in there can jam up a side or make it so their wedge is curled down and they can no longer move. There's nothing that in the pits Tombstone's going to do differently, and there's nothing Mad Catter should be doing in the pits last second to know they might face a big horizontal spinner. Uh, so overall, though, this is one of those things where any one hit will significantly diminish Mad Catter's abilities. And so if you get any one corner of any one of the drive wheels gets fouled up, the rest of it can go to Tombstone. So if I had to be driving one of these two bots, I might choose Tombstone. That's just because I don't know Mad Catter as well as Bite Force, even though it's a very similar design.
Yeah, it's the match I'm most excited to see of this group anyway. And I did pick Tombstone over Mad Catter. Nothing against Martin Mason. What his team has done this season has been nothing shy of impressive. But the postseason is a whole different beast. And I feel like, Ray did not have a great regular season. And does that factor in at all to postseason? No, but he's going to drive probably a little harder. Then I have Uppercut over Hijinks. Love Jen to death, but Uppercut has just been such a destructive bot. I mean, really one that nobody wants to face whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And then Beta over Ribot. I kind of went with the veteran experience there, although Ribot, very bright future in my mind after seeing them this season. And then Black Dragon over Slammo. Love Craig Danby, and he's finally found a bot that really works well for him and is fun to watch. But Black Dragon is just a nasty bot. So those are the four that I have advancing. Is there anything that with your veteran experience you see that could be the difference maker for one of the others to come out on top?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with the Black Dragon aspect because, again, if you go for a minute of control, but then one bad hit, I would say the Uppercut and Hijinks is pretty questionable and up in the air because, you can look at the first few matches of Hijinks and see any little issues or anything like that, but I haven't seen a really good anti-horizontal spinner defense for Uppercut. Maybe I'm not remembering something. And so with the two exposed wheels and that front sort of fork thing, I think that one is a little closer of a more of a toss up.
So then from there, I have Uppercut over Beta and then Tombstone over Black Dragon. This is me riding that momentum of Ray Billings in the postseason of BattleBots, but Black Dragon would probably be, the toughest challenge, at least on that chunk of the bracket. And then, crazy as it sounds, I put Uppercut over Tombstone. If there's fairy dust that Ray Billings has going into the 32, I feel like it might run out by them. And I kind of had flashbacks to you versus Ray Billings in that fight and just how crazy that was. This would be a similar matchup, a matchup I very much would want to see. I know a lot of fans at home probably really want to see this one to determine who will advance to the final four from that group. So that's my lower left chunk of the bracket. Your thoughts on who I have coming out on top to represent one of the four?
Off the top, I don't think it's unsafe to say Tombstone just comes out of that. In terms of if you look at put those robots into a lineup and you don't even know who they're facing, I don't think that'd be a bad decision to bet. And it's not betting on a front runner in the sense of Tombstone. It's analyzing that they're good at the competition aspect, and other robots have to be lucky against them.
Yeah, Uppercut over Beta and then Tombstone over Black Dragon. I think if there's a bot that can knock out Tombstone before Uppercut, it would definitely
Black
be.
Dragon is don't discount them. That's the one where I would think that maybe they would have a chance because they have a good broad horizontal steel wedge, and then their weapon is so stout and thick. I wouldn't have any concerns about a direct hit. That's one where I might think Black Dragon. They're one of the toughest to actually face out there.
All right, so going over to my lower right portion of the bracket, we start off with number 3, Copperhead versus Mammoth at number 30. Lockjaw versus Shatter, Endgame versus Perfect Phoenix, and Jackpot versus Rotator. Jackpot, again, another 3-0 bot that did not make it into the top 10 seeding. And I love this story. It's the bot on a budget. And
Mhm.
looking at your background, you're like, what's a budget? It's just this is a great bot. And I feel that Victor Soto and Rotator, again, a veteran, very well-driven bot. But I don't know. Jackpot has continued to impress and wow me fight after fight. So I really think that they come in there feeling slighted at the fact that they didn't make the top 10 and have a point to prove. But how far they go to do that, I don't know. That's going to be, for me, the matchup to watch in this one also. But Copperhead and Mammoth, that's a very odd matchup. Lockjaw and Shatter should be good. And then Endgame and Perfect Phoenix. What do you think about these matchups?
Yeah, I mean it's always interesting here. So we're gonna go one by one. Can you give me so like Endgame Perfect Phoenix, for example? That this one as a builder of brutality of the past, and I've just been really loving seeing Tyler out there and seeing literally that the robot operates and got a couple wins was just the one of the best moments from the fan perspective of seeing that. I was like jumping up down on the TV when I saw that. I think that in game would be well prepared for a robot like that because they're good friends with all the Bloodsport guys, and um, it's a sort of classical old school design, the Hazard overhead bar spinner. So I feel like in game will have the edge on that robot because it's just an older. I mean, it's an older robot. It's not going to outlast if it comes down to a bunch of weapon on weapon hits throughout the match.
And then Copperhead versus Mammoth. Now, the Mammoth versus Huge fight was very fun and entertaining, but it's two bots that are both of equal size and proportion. But then you have a Hypershock versus a Mammoth, and it's a very different story.
Mm-hmm.
How would you prepare for a bot like Mammoth? And does Copperhead still have the advantage with its primary weapon and being low to the ground?
It's hard. It's very hard to face both unusual robots and it's very hard to face big robots. And Mammoth and Huge obviously are both of those. Uh, in this case, I feel like Copperhead is pretty dialed in enough that it could drive around and hit the wheels. And hitting one of those wheels is going to do it. Um, and because the robot is pretty low and hard to get under from the front aspect, I think it will be hard for Mammoth to affect it in a way that even if they flip him over, if I were Copperhead, I would just sort of drive back into Mammoth and hit them again. So I would think that Copperhead has the edge here. I'd rather be driving Copperhead in that match.
And then Jackpot and Rotator, my pick for the best fight out of that particular portion of the bracket.
I would agree with that. I think they're the two most competitive kind of bots at a glance there because Jackpot, call it budget bot is just sort of just a storyline. In my opinion is, I would argue we do it on a less budget by not spending out of pocket $4,000 or $5,000 on part. We try to raise money to negate the cost of the robot, but in terms of classical, vertical spinner versus horizontal spinner, those always make great fights. And we've seen Rotator's weakness against vertical spinners. And it's not just a problem with Rotator. Obviously, it's hard to be a horizontal spinner against a vertical spinner because the vertical spinner has the floor to react against. And so the interesting thing here is that Jackpot's vertical blades are pretty thin, and we haven't really seen a big horizontal connection yet to their weapon. But that's where I think Rotator could really foul up their weapon, is if they are spinning the right direction to flap the spinner over.
Yeah, this is where I think the better driver probably has the advantage. But we talk about these matchups, and it's under the assumption that everything goes according to plan for each bot. But we all know that it can take one loose chain from Bombshell to hang up
Yeah.
Ray Billings, and then that match is suddenly over. So I have from this advancing to the next round: Copperhead over Mammoth, Lockjaw over Shatter, Endgame over Perfect Phoenix, and Jackpot over Rotator. Kind of taking a flyer on that one, even though that there's a very distinct difference in seeding there. But like you said, not that really matters too much.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, Copperhead over Lockjaw, Endgame over Jackpot, and Copperhead coming out on top to represent the lower right in the final four. So, your thoughts on who's advancing in the matchups potentially?
I think that's a pretty good analysis. I think the rotator versus jackpot is the one I'd be most curious to see because of the fact that there's thinner side armor and the undercutter aspect. I think rotator could pull off the win there, and they do have a lot more years of experience on bigger robots. So I would tend to say, come on, Victor and crew, you should be able to prepare for this kind of matchup to get a little bit of an edge. Well, we'll see though. Otherwise, I tend to agree with what you got there.
Then we go to the top right portion of the bracket. Number two, Bloodsport, who has been in my top three all season long. They will take on Gruff. And then we have Fusion versus Tantrum, Sawblaze versus Kraken, and Scorpios versus Witch Doctor. Now, these matchups, ones to watch, I feel like Sawblaze and Kraken somehow stands out to me because Kraken has had such great fights all season, and so has Jameson Go. But this could be the perfect storm of just the two bots that you don't really want to have facing each other because you just don't know what's going to happen. What do you think about the first matchups for this portion?
I think that's interesting. Also, Witch Doctor versus Scorpios. I mean that is a match where both robots are competing at sort of the ultimate level of competition to really try to win, and that one is also just going to be very close fought. I think both Kraken and Scorpios have always impressed me with their in the box ability to get underneath their opponent and really control the match. And Fusion and Tantrum are both. So Fusion is very powerful, but Tantrum is very strong, very stout. So it's an interesting matchup.
Yeah, Fusion and Tantrum is the one that I was hung up on probably the longest, just because I know that Reese is one of the Team Waiachi members, and they have all that veteran experience on the team, but it hasn't always gone right for him either. And
Mm-hmm.
Tantrum has, really
I think they've
been,
both shown reliability issues, so
yeah.
it's really a toss up.
Bloodsport versus Gruff. I love Gruff. I really think that they've been great as far as the control bot category, but Bloodsport has just been such a tough opponent this season. They've really dialed it in and dialed it up, and I think that they're going to be the bot to beat for a good portion of the tournament.
Yeah, I would agree with that analysis. I mean, Gruff is very good at surviving, and yet Bloodsport is not kind of robot that easily just completely breaks. Obviously, in the years we've seen it have to turn off its weapon, conserve, all that kind of thing. But in reality, it's conserving when it can, and more, and then you have the problem of it's going to be scraping underneath the ground if its weapon breaks, and it will if the weapon dies, which is sort of Gruff's main goal to kill Bloodsport's weapon. Bloodsport is still able to push it around, I'm sure, with its wedgelets and forks that'll be on there.
So from that group, I have advancing Bloodsport, then Tantrum, Sawblaze, and Scorpios. And from those, Bloodsport against Sawblaze, and representing the top right in the final four, Bloodsport over Sawblaze. Now, there's a few things that I strongly considered when I made who is advancing over who. For Sawblaze over Kraken, I feel like it's about who can get under who and who has more power in their drive to really control the fight. Now, Sawblaze isn't necessarily a control bot, but if they can cause damage and keep Kraken from controlling them, that gives me the advantage to Sawblaze. And then Tantrum over Fusion was really just a coin flip. Bloodsport, obviously, but Scorpios, I had them. I thought they've been very good this season, but selfishly, I do want to see them versus Sawblaze. So I feel like that would be a prime matchup. And then Bloodsport versus Tantrum, probably a pretty good one too. But what do you think about that group?
Yeah, I think that the biggest question of which one I would not be as sure about would be Witch Doctor Scorpios, just because with exposed big wheels, although we haven't seen Scorpios ever have a real big direct wheel hit issue, I think Witch Doctor is the kind of robot that would put that to the test of both finding a way to hit their wheel directly and hitting it hard in a way that might actually cause damage. Otherwise, I would tend to agree. I think I would also say Sao Fusion, it looks great on paper, but because they were having a tough, first showing, first event, I would agree that Tantrum probably has the edge there by just being more stout.
Very true. Well, that leads us to last but not least, the top left portion of the bracket. This is the big one. We have number one, Hydra, Jake Ewert, Team Waiachi taking on 32 Hypershock. Will Bales still managed to get into the tournament, even at 32. Then Malice versus Gigabyte, Whiplash versus Huge, and Valkyrie versus Sub Zero. These are all, in my opinion, great fights. Malice has really done well, save for that one instance against Mad Catter that was a
Mm-hmm.
1 in 100,000 occurrence. But Gigabyte, when it's on, it's deadly. But when it's not, you feel for him. And then Whiplash versus Huge. This will be another great fight just because Matty Vasquez knows how to drive so well,
Yeah.
and it's going to be hard for Huge to keep up. But Valkyrie Sub Zero was probably the one that I was hung up on the most. And what's odd is I had, both Leanne and Logan on the show together, and I didn't even realize that this would end up being a matchup. But you have a flipper versus a horizontal spinner, and then up on top, you have Hydra, a flipper, versus Hyper Shock, which is a vertical spinner. So either of those two matchups stand out to you more than the other?
Yeah, well, from being that number one position and you're facing, you say 30 ranked number 32, but the 32 ranked robot is a very powerful vertical spinner. That's one that would really scare me if I was in that Hydra position, if I was Jake. Just because we've seen the problems with them facing vertical spinners and sort of the fragility of sort of their sides and back to big hits. Just because I think they have a lot of wheels all chained together, and so if you lose one of the wheels that has a lot of weight on the ground, it's just as good as losing your whole side. So that's tough. So being in that position where you're facing the lowest ranked robot is sometimes the scariest to be in. I would enjoy that if I was Will Bales because it's a good chance for an upset.
Yeah, and Valkyrie Sub Zero. I mean, Sub Zero is not to the degree of flippability like we've seen with Hydra, but still has had a very good season nonetheless. And very happy for Logan and his team. But this one, like I said, it is a horizontal spinner taking on a flipper, which, Hydra didn't have any problems against uppercut last week, but when you have a flipper versus a horizontal, though, now that creates kind of both an advantage and disadvantage because it gives you an additional part that you can kind of get under. What do you think about that one?
I tend to think there that Valkyrie is very well built and their weapon is very powerful. And because their weapon is so powerful, I think Sub Zero will struggle here. Overall, flipper or not, it's sort of about those seams in their wedge in their front and the connections in the side. And if I had to say, okay, what if Sub Zero gets a flip or two in? Okay, I don't think it will impact Valkyrie and knock them out. Even upside down, I think they could still hit stuff on Sub Zero. So in that sense, I think it would go to Valkyrie.
Yeah, that's a great point that you make there. And then Malice versus Gigabyte. This is Bunny's first time as team captain, and she had a really great season, other than that crazy instance against Mad Catter, like I mentioned. Whiplash and Huge, we could see this one again, and they're no stranger to each other, so that'll be a lot of fun. What do you think about these last two matchups?
Yeah, I personally am the most excited to see Whiplash versus Huge, just because I mean, watching Huge fight in the tournament aspect is really interesting because that's where it really requires an actual strategy plan. Doesn't mean you can come up with one, and there's not ways you can always modify your robot to be able to handle the edge cases of competitors. That's just a true trade-off, and so I think that Whiplash is the kind of robot to face it because they have the lifter and it's a very animated machine, and I think they spent a lot of time rebuilding and rearmoring their robot to handle more spinner hits than they ever have before. So I would give the edge to Whiplash there. But either way, it's very hard to face, a robot like Huge or Mammoth and all that. And with Gigabyte and Malice, it is tough because, again, if both robots are operational, I would tend to give it then to Gigabyte just by the nature of their spinner will have more mass in it and its natural sort of shell shape will get underneath Malice. So I think the reactions will fly away less.
Yeah, from this group, I have Hydra over Hypershock, Malice over Gigabyte, Whiplash over Huge, and then Valkyrie over Sub-Zero. So then Hydra advances over Malice, Whiplash advances over Valkyrie, and Hydra over Whiplash to represent the top left corner in the final four.
It's hard to say. I mean, the more you look at all these brackets, it's just I know people say it, but every single match is such a toss up, especially when the first determiner is are they knocked out or not. So it's
Yeah, I'd be very excited to see Whiplash versus Valkyrie again. I thought that was a great fight.
that
So
was a
there's
great
a couple
match.
of
Yeah.
potential matchups. I'm trying to avoid Hydra versus Huge, and I feel like it's right there. But that was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. As
Sure.
somebody who's a veteran in the sport, what did you think when you first saw that play out?
Oh, I loved it. I don't harbor anything negative against building something custom or taking a what anyone calls it a cheap win or whatever it is. It's a competition. It's an engineering competition. You're building a robot to the rules. The production and they won't let you put in the thing that they don't approve of. So there's definitely no discussion of is this allowed or not, or is this cheap. If I was driving Hydra, would I have fired the flipper a few times? Yes. I would have done it just to make sure that I didn't win just by pushing and piss off people. So I certainly would have fired the flipper. I would have, especially there's a couple opportunities I could have.
So my top four, my final four, I should say, is actually the top four. But that didn't have anything to do with how I picked, each individual fight
Mm-hmm.
and the outcome. Like I was number blind to these seedings. And there's some matchups where I picked the higher seed, but in my mind, it would be a full-on upset. And Jackpot over Rotator would have been one of those. But my final four, Hydra, Uppercut, Bloodsport, Copperhead. My championship, Hydra versus Copperhead. I feel it would be the best quality fight just because if everything, like I said, sidebar disclaimer, this is under the assumption that everything is working perfectly fine
Mm-hmm.
with every robot that wins and advances,
Sure.
and nothing can possibly go wrong in
Of
the middle
course.
of a fight.
Perfect world.
Perfect world. I would love to see these two and my champion, who I've predicted. Are you ready for this? Copperhead. So there you have it, Paul. Am I crazy or am I in the
No,
ballpark of?
it's not crazy at all. I mean, you can make a good story like that for probably any 8 or 10 of the robots out of the 32. That's just reality because there's really good solid machines, and it's because every one of those robots has some serious fatal flaw. Every robot has a drivetrain, and if you take out one side of the drivetrain, that robot's done. So giving it the Copperhead, on paper years ago, I would have given Copperhead a lot more credit just in general and Poison Arrow and all that because they have a lot of power, very stout, well built. Them having had some less than perfect showings in the past has no bearings on them doing well now.
Well, since you are still the reigning champion for a few more episodes of this season, if you had one of those bounty like situations where these were all competing to take you on to
Mm-hmm.
defend your title, like who's the one bot that you would really want to take on in a championship fight?
Oh man. Usually I just think of who I don't want to fight. uh,
That's too easy.
which is most people. I haven't thought about that. Something like a rotator. That was one of my favorite matches ever, where they've got a horizontal and we want to just try to hit directly on there and break it off. So any horizontal, I would love to face.
There you
A
go.
Valkyrie, a Bloodsport, anything, a rotator, especially if they don't have floor scraping wedges, then that's why Bloodsport's hard because they've got those little forks down there.
I think you guys versus Bloodsport would have been a really good one. I would have been excited to see that. But hopefully, we get so many potential dream matchups next season when you triumphantly return to BattleBots, if that is still the plan. But folks, he's one of the most decorated champions in BattleBots, and if you're wondering like how is he so successful, his pit is one of the most organized pits you've ever seen. Like it organization goes a long way in making sure you know where every piece is and that it's properly labeled. I mean, you take this
I
whole
wish we had that. It
sport.
looks organized. We make it look organized, but really we do have the stuff to repair the robot, but really it's the teammates that put in all the work to keep the robot going, and that's would be the answer why is that I think I've got the best teammates out there. Everyone says that, but only one team really has the best teammates. So
Oh, poor David Eaton of Rusty. He's got the best team.
oh, I've been loving watching David and Rusty. I was an instant fan, and I was messaging him right away, saying, I'm such a fan. It's so cool, and just loving the whole thing, and how reliable and strong it is. And so I'm trying to tell him that you nailed it on the reliability front, because that is really hard to make it last 3 minutes and not get tossed around.
Well, I'm sure that was a great text for him to get. And there you have it, folks. That is my tournament of 32 bracket all filled out. And I posted the graphic up on here while you guys were watching, so you could see it a bit more clearly than, pen on paper and me holding it up in front of the camera. But Paul, we've missed you. We hope to see you back soon. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a real treat to talk championship BattleBots with the reigning champion.
No, thank you. It's really fun to always chat, and it's really great to have you put on all the show and give your analysis, because everyone loves watching your show, and a lot of the other shows that are produced is what makes it really fun for us to see how the community is just so into it. We love it.
Well, thank you so much. Enjoy the time off. Enjoy married life. I gotta say, it's a whole new world, but you guys will make it work. I have no doubt. So once again, folks, he is Paul Ventimiglia of the reigning champion, Byte Force. You have a great rest of your night, and thank you so much.
Thanks, you too.
And one more big thank you to Paul for joining me. It took us some doing, but we finally were able to connect and link up our schedules and make this thing happen. It was a lot of fun. Great conversation. So thank you, Paul. Hope to see you back in the Battle Box real soon. So we've only got a few new episodes of BattleBots left before crowning a new champion. Those new episodes air every Thursday at 8/7 Central on Discovery. And with that, only a handful more episodes of Red Square, Blue Square, which is uploaded and available every Friday whenever we get around to it. So enjoy the start of the tournament of 32, and we will see you next time. For Red Square, Blue Square, I'm Richard Tiemann. Good night, everyone.